your mind.
Good evening and welcome. It's Open Your Mind. You have myself, Alan James.
And you have myself, Stephen George. A very, very good evening to you.
Good evening. It's Sunday the 30th of September 2012. Good evening. Right, okay, we're going to have a packed show. Our guest is going to be John Moore. We're going to be bringing John in a few minutes, but we just have a few things to go through first. One of them is the communications.
Yes, communication channels are as follow. info@oymireland.com for your email. We also have the chat facility on the website as well. You can log in there and you can speak. Well, you can type anyway. You can chat away to all the people in the chat facility. You can also put your questions in there to our special guest this evening. To get there, go to oymireland.com and navigate your way into the chat. Log in with your real name or a pseudonym and post away to your heart's content. We also have the guest book on the website as well, where you can leave messages for this generation and future generations. And lastly, if you'd like to, you can contact us by...
Give us a call on 046 927 1212.
04692711212. If you're calling in from the outside Republic of Ireland, it's 00353 in front of that. Alan.
Cheers, Dave. Okay, just donations again. Thanks to everyone that's, if there's any ad that you see on the website that you like and you're clicking on, fantastic. Keep doing that. Really, really good stuff. We got a donation in today from a particular person. Thanks very much for that. You know who you are. It's going to be a big help to get the actual frequency counted, which we need to work with the RF detector.
And that Ferrari you're after as well.
No. I wish. We're going to need a lot more clicks than that to get the Ferrari. So, look, just a big thank you to everybody for, supporting OYM and doing the donations, because obviously what we're trying to do is trying to get the equipment that we need to offer scanning for targeted people over here in Ireland. So, when we reach our target, then, that'd be fantastic. So keep doing what you're doing. It's fantastic. And, the funds are coming in, which is great. Steve.
Alan.
You're going to tell us about Donegal, aren't you?
Yes, I'm going to tell you about Donegal. Both myself and Alan were in Donegal on Monday evening.
Were we?
Via Skype. Yeah, we hooked up with the lads on Forum for Change on Monday evening. And it was kind of one of these interviews where they kind of interviewed us. They had a Skype camera. It was passed around the room. We kind of shot the breeze for a while. It was actually like being in the room with the lads up there, John, Kim, and the rest of the men and women. It was a good interview. We kind of there was a lot of information floating about, and we got a lot of questions. We answered some questions. We enlightened some people. Some people in the audience actually had some good information that enlightened us as well. So it was supposed to be a 30 to 45 minute interview that I think went on for, it must have been 2.5 hours. But it was absolutely fantastic. And the podcast of said interview is available on our podcast section on the website.
Yeah, if you go down the menu and select OYM interviews, that's where you'll find it. So if you want to have a listen to about what we talked about in Donegal, that's where you can go and you can download it or just play it. Now, the other thing is that we've had a good few requests from listeners wanting to, ask us about the Facebook page. And we did originally set it up, and then we decided, we're going to shut it down because we know there's a couple of websites being shut down by Facebook because of the alternative media side of things. And then myself and Steve had another chat and we said, okay, we've got requests from listeners to get the Facebook page back up. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So it's back up and running now. So if you go to facebook.com/OYM Internet Radio, we're on Facebook. And you can pop along. And we're putting information up there. One of the things that we did put up was the information about the household charge. A couple of, just a few newspaper clippings that were sent in from one of our listeners, which we felt that was quite poignant to put it up there and just fill you in on what's going on. So after the show or whatever, later on, maybe tomorrow, you can pop into our Facebook page. And if you like it, that'd be fantastic. Pop along and like the actual site and have a read of the information.
Well, we were actually quite surprised because after the site went live, within, I think it was before we done the interview on last Monday evening, we were just kind of having a bit of a chat about it. So we decided, bring it back to life, which we did. And by by the following evening, I think we were up to something like 50, 60, I think, or 70 likes. So yeah, we were quite happy about that.
Yeah, we were going to advertise for people to like it so we could actually change the name and have a proper URL. But within one day of going live, we surpassed the number, which is fantastic. Brilliant. Anyway, how's your week, Steve?
My week has been absolutely fantastic since I won the lottery.
Fantastic. I was wondering why you were sitting there with all the bling bling and the fur coat.
Yeah, get your hands off that gold chain. But no, my week's it's just been the usual mix, Alan, of fun and frolics. I've been kind of, God knows you send out enough of the information to the registered listeners on the website. So I kind of spend a lot of my free time of an evening. Once I go in and kind of do the daddy and the husband bit, I then kind of lock myself in the computer room and or the dining room, and I basically kind of go through all the links and try and see what I can learn. But we're going through all the links and some of the video footage, and a lot of it is quite interesting. Some of the stuff, as I say, it's kind of stuff we've seen before and we would be familiar with, but it never kind of does any harm to kind of refresh yourself on what's going on, just to get up to speed. But the one thing that I did mention it last week, I mentioned it also to the lads on Forum for Change. It's just in case anyone's looking for Forum for Change, they do have a Facebook page, and it's Forum, Forum, the number 4 and Change, CHANGE. And you can like them as well as liking us. We don't mind. But we had a great chat with them, and the one thing that we did mention, and some people in the room weren't actually aware of it, was this. It's the new the referendum that's coming up in November, where they want to change one of the articles in our Constitution in relation to our children. And I know I touched on it last week, so I won't kind of delve too much into it this week, but I will give a brief overview. And it is the fact, if this is voted in, the government, our beautiful government, will change this article in the Constitution, whereby Mammy and Daddy will not have as much, I won't say control, but what would be a better word for it? Not controllable.
Well, not controlled, but being Mammy and Daddy.
It kind of, the state will then take on the Mammy and Daddy role, and they will have more power. Yeah, maybe that's a better word. They will have more power, and they will be able to supersede whatever we say as parents. Insofar as once your child goes into a hospital, if they have to go for a checkup or anything at all, once you cross the threshold of the hospital, your child is then under the care of the government. And if the hospital decides that the child needs an operation, a blood transfusion, or maybe just to have vaccines full of mercury and thimerosal pumped into their body because maybe it's something that you didn't agree with, well then once they're in there, they're under the control of the government, i.e. the state, and they will be able to vaccinate your child and do any operations that they feel are necessary without your consent. Your consent is only good up to walking in the door. The same would also be true for a school situation as well. Once the child, say, goes into school, they are no longer under your care. They are under the care of the state, and if something happens to them in the school, you don't necessarily have to be notified. And there's a lot more into it, a lot more going on in that referendum, in the new wording of it. And one thing that frightened me and a lot of other people is that if you can no longer chastise your child, i.e. put them on the bowl step or ground them. You can't do that anymore. And if you do, and let's say the nanny state became aware of it, then that's a no-no. You would then be seen as an unfit parent, and your child could be taken off you, not put up for foster care, but could bypass foster care and go straight to adoption. I kid you not, people. I kid you not. That is exactly where this referendum is going if it's voted in. So we're doing our best here at OYM, and even outside of OYM, but Alan and I are personally interacting with other people, and we're giving them information in relation to this. I urge you, anyone especially in Ireland, to get the information. It's available on OYM. Get it and spread it around with everyone that you can, because it's so important that this referendum does not go through. Even in the Kenny, our Taoiseach, he was actually in record as saying that, for too long, we've adopted the attitude where, the children should be seen and not heard. Well, that's BS, basically, because maybe that's one of his, ploys to get people to vote, because they think that, maybe if we do vote this thing in, the kids will be better looked after, and it's all BS. It's wrong. So spread the information, get it off the site, get it off the Facebook, and please spread it around. Rant over, Alan.
Okay, we'll just take your soapbox down at the moment. And of course, if the government turn around and tell us that it's a good thing to vote yes, you can probably guarantee that we should be voting no, because we know what the government. I mean, Lisbon Treaty, the Fiscal treaty. I mean, you know what the government is like over here.
Come here. Anyway, there's a few other things I was watching during the week and updating myself on, namely the fluoride and what the Aisling and the rest of the team are doing. And they were at the Ploughing Championships here in Ireland during the week. And was it during this week? Yeah, it was. I think it was the Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday, and they were done Trojan work. It was Aisling Fitzgibbon and Terry Lawton, and also I think Steve Kerr as well. They done great work. They've got some video footage up there on the internet as well. They went around and they educated a lot of people. So kudos to them as well. A few other things that I kind of touched on and watched during the week. At some point during the show, a little red light will go off above my head, and I will mention them. But in the meantime, Alan, how was your week?
Well, just quickly, we have a question from Liam on TNS saying, where does it say that in the new articles proposed? Explain. We don't have time, Liam, at the moment, but I'm sure if you send us in an email, Steve will be able to point you in the right direction where the information is, and you can check it out for yourself. That's what I'd say probably be the best thing at the moment with times on our hands. But, this week, well, basically, as I said, if you go to our Facebook, you'll find information about the household charge and the septic tank charge, which the government are trying to get money off us for. The other thing that was in the news during the week was that Iceland's economy now growing faster than the US and EU after arresting corrupt bankers. Now, I believe, and I say I believe, because nobody can tell you what to believe, that the Irish politicians, basically the government, work for the bankers and corporate interests, to be honest with you. And the government, I mean, we know the government don't care about the people over here. I'm still reading that book, by the way, Anglo Republic, and it's just getting dodgier and dodgier as I get further down the book as to the shenanigans that went on between the bankers and between the politicians, Brian Cowan especially. So, an interesting book. Now, the other thing I did during the week, I did an impromptu interview with Tony from These Changing Times Radio. So, thesechangingtimesradio.ning.com, with Times being a Z. And I think it'd be worthwhile having Tony on the show. We had a very good interview, and we talked for 2 hours on the interview, and then we talked for another hour and a half after the interview. And we were just talking about how deep the rabbit hole goes. Really, really how deep the rabbit hole goes. And one of the things we got talking about was a thing called the gin. Now, that's Jinn, or it can be spelled Djinn.
Oh, so it's not the other kind?
No, it's not the other
kind.
It's not
a gin and tonic?
Now, it's not, we're not going to be talking about it now, but go and check it up. Go and Google Djinn or Jinn and see for yourself and see what you think, see what you come across. And, based on the conversations we had, I mean, I really do think that if the information, which I believe is provable, I mean, history is going to have to be rewritten. But Tony wrote 2 books, and it's called Blueprints to Cosmic Consciousness. So what I did is we put them up on OYM. So we go to the front of the OYM website and go down to recent articles. You'll see the book 1 and book 2 available for download. They're PDF files. So if you want to kind of get a heads up on a few things and Tony's view on things, then download the books and have a read. And, if you have any feedback after you read them, give us a shout and let us know. So there you go. Yes, Jim says, Lord Vapor says, Jinn means genie. Yeah, they talk about the genie of the lamp. It's a similar thing. It's interesting, very interesting. I found it quite interesting. Without further ado, we're going to get a guest on. Now, our guest has a radio show over in the States called The John Moore Show, and obviously I guess it's called John Moore. And John has been involved in special operations, covert operations, psychological operations, undercover operations, surveillance operations, bodyguard for executives, stars like Jane Fonda, Charlton Heston, private investigator, firearms instructor, intelligence analyst, homicide detective. He's a radio host, and he's a dad, and he's a grandfather, and an all-round good guy. So, John, good evening. How are you doing?
Alan, thank you. Good to be with you.
Cheers for coming on, John. I cheekily, how I got John, I have to explain how I got John on. John has a radio show that's on 5 days a week. It's on at 1 p.m. GMT time. And if you go to John's website, which is thelibertyman.com, you can hear John there at 1 p.m. GMT every day of the week, Monday to Friday. And I listen to John's show on a regular basis. And I thought it'd be really great to have John on. And our listeners know that I've mentioned your show, John, on a few occasions, saying go over and listen to John's show and listen to what he has to say. And I just felt we needed to get you on because you had so much information that I want people to hear what information you've come across. And I think it's fair enough to say, John, that you're the kind of guy that, obviously with all that experience that you have, that you don't believe, obviously, in hearsay. You like documentation, you like proof, and you cross-reference all your material.
Well, that's correct, Alan. I live in the world of evidence. I've been investigating murders since 1973, so I'm in my 40th year as a homicide detective. And I live in a world of evidence. Of course, before that, I was in military intelligence, which trained me and disciplined my mind to be a research tool as opposed to the undisciplined mind that most 19-year-olds have. So I've been living in the world of evidence and seeking out verifiable evidence since 1967 when I entered military intelligence.
Well, the questions are already coming in, John, which is great. But the reason why I wanted to clarify your background and what you've been involved in, because for the information that you're going to talk to us about, I think it's important for people to know where you come from and who you are, and that you don't deal with hearsay and then go out and talk about it. You actually go and investigate it and you check it out. And I know you have a number of sources who don't know each other who are coming back to you with the same information. Is that fair to say?
Right, that's very accurate. And you touched on something that's very important. First of all, the two basic skills of any homicide detective and many investigators is two skills: locating witnesses and taking statements, both of which I've developed to a high degree many years ago. And you touched on something also, Alan, that's very important. When you have two or more witnesses who don't know each other, essentially saying almost exactly the same thing, that starts giving a lot of credibility to whatever it is you're looking into, whether it's a murder or the violent climate change that's already upon us.
Okay, and now the things we're going to talk about tonight are not only just the climate change, but I know that you're very you're big into the gun side of things, and you teach gun training to a lot of people as well. And for over in America, obviously, there's a lot of states that you can actually get a gun. We in Ireland obviously can't do that. Unless you join a gun club and you fill everything out in triplicate, and even then, they're probably very, very lucky to give you a gun. And if you do get a gun, it's probably going to be a rifle. You won't get a handgun. Very rare to get that. So we're going to be looking at the practical things. Obviously, the fact that a lot of people over here in Ireland are struggling and they just barely have enough money to feed themselves. So, I want you to talk about the survival thing as well, because I know you're big into that, but on a very, very, very tight budget for people over here. But before we lose the feed in the chat facility, because the chat questions go up, Steve, if you want to ask John the first question there.
Yeah, John, a question in from Lord Vapor, one of our regulars on the show, and his question is, was John Moore fed false intel from his sources in order to specifically discredit him about Nibiru in the solar system, and certain military types were being warned?
Right. Well, that's a great question, and I've had to answer that dozens and dozens of times over the years. It was the spring of 2000 when two friends of mine who were independent researchers approached me about Nibiru and told me about this, and I'd never heard about it before, and when I did hear it, I thought, my friends both needed tinfoil hats real bad. But I respected them and their work enough to approach another friend of mine who's been connected to the lettered agencies since the mid-1970s when he was working for NATO in Southeast Asia. And I approached him and I told him about this, and he basically told me I needed a tinfoil hat. But then he went ahead and said, I'll go ahead and check it out, John. I'll get back with you. So about 2 or 3 weeks later, he gets back with me, and he says, John, it's exactly what you said it is. NASA has known about this since 1979. They've been preparing for it since 1979. It is the real thing. So once I got that confirmation, I went ahead and began my own research, which was going along quite well. In fact, in the spring of, or it was January 2005, I was knowledgeable enough to go on a nationwide speaking tour with an outfit called the Prophecy Club, and they had me in 7 or 8 American cities talking on the topic. Fast forward to August 2005, I'm having lunch with a friend of mine who I served with in the military, and he starts telling me about a classified briefing that he attended, put on by the Navy. He was a dual service veteran. I was Army, and he was Navy and Army. And he talks about this classified briefing where he's being told that during his lifetime, the oceans would come out of their basins, flooding all coastal areas worldwide. And they were also advised, these Navy veterans, of course they were active duty at the time, they were also advised that they should consider relocating to one of the known safe havens at high altitude inside the United States, one of them being the Missouri, Arkansas, Ozarks, where I am, another being the border of Montana and Wyoming, which is another, as far as the Navy is concerned, safe area. I don't particularly care for it because of the Yellowstone supervolcano being there. So, gentlemen, it's been a long and hard road locating these witnesses, taking their statements. The summer of 2010, we located another very, very important witness, Dr. Luigi Zangari, a PhD scientist who lives and works in Italy. His work is with a team of PhD scientists in Europe and North America working on nothing but the Gulf Stream. And we talked to him a couple of times in July 2010. And both these conversations are archived at Genesis Communications Network, an internet-based radio station out of Austin, Texas. Our first conversation, which was the third hour of Dr. Deagle's show, the next to last Friday of July 2010, he told us that the Gulf Stream was very fragile and very much at risk and may have stopped. They weren't sure yet. He also told us something that kind of caught me off guard. Since I began my research, I came to understand that the Gulf Stream affected weather on the east coast of the United States, the British Isles, and Western Europe, and most of us know that. What I did not know that Dr. Zangari told me is that the Gulf Stream used to, past tense, regulate the jet stream, causing the jet stream to behave in a predictable manner, providing the predictable temperatures and precipitation that farmers who grow grain need so they can grow their grains effectively and have an ongoing profitable business. The fourth week of July, Dr. Zangari came on with us, and he told us, and he confirmed through his calculations, he and his team of PhD scientists, that the Gulf Stream had in fact stopped on June 12, 2010. Now, you may recall, gentlemen, it was about that time in July 2010, Moscow had the hottest summer since they've kept records, and Moscow has weather records going back 1,000 years. The following winter of 2010-2011, Moscow had the coldest winter in 1,000 years. Now, I point this out, and since you're in that part of the world, it's interesting to note that England, Ireland, and Scotland are just about the same distance from the North Pole as Moscow is, give or take a few hundred miles. Very close to the same distance. Your area has always had very mild winters up until 2 winters ago. And would you like to comment, gentlemen, on the last 2 winters compared to all the other winters in your lifetime?
Oh yes, we are going to have to do that. Well, it wasn't last year. It was the year before last. We had a severe winter over here. Pretty bad. It's probably one of the worst we've had. Would you say, Steve?
It's been the worst one that I can remember. As the last time I remember it being as bad as it was 2 years ago was when I was in school. I think that was that 81, 83?
I think that was probably 82.
82.
Yeah, 82. That was when it was a bad one. And what the weather people were saying over here is that, oh yeah, this happens every 10 years. You get extreme weather conditions. This is what they're saying.
My understanding, Alan, is that the pipes were freezing underground.
Oh yeah.
In Ireland.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So many houses had burst pipes and stuff.
Here's something we need to keep in mind. All human-built infrastructure is built with certain underlying engineering premises. When it comes to burying pipes, they have an engineering premise based on where the frost line is. And if you don't bury the pipes deep enough, your pipes are going to freeze.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's more than an inconvenience. When you lose your fresh water, you lose your ability to put out fires.
Yeah.
So it's an extremely dangerous situation. But here's the impact that it's having on all of this, and this has to do with growing grains: corn, wheat, barley, oats, spelt, rice, soybeans, all these grains that feed the people and feed the animals. Men and women involved in growing grains, they have a 5-year business plan that they look at where they plan on getting 1 bad harvest for every 4 good ones. And everything they do is based on that. How much land they buy and lease, the equipment they buy and lease, the fertilizer, seed, herbicides, and pesticides that they purchase is all based on that being a pretty dependable business model, that they'll get 1 bad harvest for every 4 good harvests. Well, gentlemen, now since the Gulf Stream has stopped and the jet stream is behaving so terribly erratically, that business model is broken also. So men and women involved in growing grains are kind of grasping around, trying to find a new business model, and of course they haven't been able to because we're only into the second harvest this year. The harvest in North America, the grain harvest, is going to be wretched, probably the poorest in 40-plus years in terms of the yield of all the various grains that are being planted. That translates into dramatically higher prices at the grocery store. And that's what we're looking at in Ireland, in England, in Scotland, in North America, all over Europe. That's what we're looking at right now, is dramatically increased prices in basically most food commodities.
Yeah, and one of the things, I think, when you say the Gulf Stream stopped in 2010, what we're experiencing now in America, we have a severe heat which is affecting all the corn crops. Now, America supplies something like 50%, if not more, of the world with corn. And over here, over in Europe, we have severe weather conditions. We have the opposite to that. And what happened, the farmers over here are giving out saying the crops are spoiled because the weather is so wet. I mean, It never stops raining over here. You know, it really, you have one or 2 days of sunshine, and then it just constantly rains.
We're seeing extremes all over North America. First of all, we need to back up. The Gulf Stream was given its name by Benjamin Franklin about 200 years ago. The scientists call it the North Atlantic Thermohaline Conveyor. Now, that's a mouthful. And when it stopped in June of 2010, it started acting as a blocking mechanism, blocking the jet stream from moving this normal west to east weather pattern it's always done forever. That's what's caused the extreme drought we're experiencing in North America. And I would venture and hazard to say, gentlemen, that the same problems with the jet stream are causing the extreme precipitation that you're getting in Europe. It all goes back to the jet stream, which goes back to the Gulf Stream. Now, the Gulf Stream has been at risk for a long time. I'm going to give you guys a homework assignment. You can look up this article on Google probably and read it at no charge. I do sell copies on my website, but you can get a copy at no charge probably. Real catchy title. Here it is. I'll say it twice slowly. An abrupt climate change scenario and its implications for United States national security.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
Once again slowly. An abrupt climate change scenario and its implications for United States national security. So it's a 22-page article, gentlemen. It's an executive summary that the United States Department of Defense, the Pentagon, paid for to look at two future possible scenarios. This was published in 2003, by the way, 9 years ago. The two scenarios were the following: the Gulf Stream slowing down dramatically, the second one being the Gulf Stream stopping. And they talk about mass migrations of people, they talk about starvation, they talk about wars, all a consequence of either of those things happening. Now, in 2003, the scientists knew the Gulf Stream was slowing down. When I wrote my paper, No Need for Panic, in the fall of 2005, the Gulf Stream had lost about one-third of its mass and velocity. By the early spring of 2010, the Gulf Stream had lost more than 50%, probably closer to 60 or 70% of its mass and velocity. Then something else happened, the British petroleum oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. That broke what they call the Gulf Current Loop, the warm water that came out between Florida and Cuba and joined up with the rest of the Gulf Stream going up the eastern seaboard before it would start headed north by northeast towards the British Isles. You can look at, on my website, gentlemen, there's a link to the U.S. Navy website where every 24 hours they publish a brand new map showing sea surface temperatures worldwide. We also have a screen capture from before June of 2010 showing the Gulf Stream functioning normally. Well, if you go there now and you look at the Navy's map, you'll see the Gulf Stream coming up the east coast of the United States. It gets about as far as Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, starts going east by northeast towards the British Isles. It goes out a few hundred miles, does a loop-to-loop, peters out, and stops. And that's where we are right now, and it's not going to change.
And that's
I sometimes kid about parking some aircraft carriers out there with their back ends facing towards the British Isles and anchored to get the Gulf Stream going again, but that won't do it.
No, I think you want something a bit more than that. And what's causing all this, John? What do you think is causing all this?
There's a scientific experiment that's been done and with the same results each time. You take a tank of water, about 10 by 10 feet, and you guys use meters or feet?
We use meters.
Yeah, you see, it's a British system that we use, but you dropped it.
Listen,
feet and inches is the British system.
We do use feet as well, John.
Anyway,
we do use feet as well.
Let's say 3 by 3 meters and 100 meters long. And you fill it up with relatively cold salt water, the same salinity as the ocean normally would be. Then you inject warm salt water at one end. There will be a thermal barrier developed between the warm salt water and the cold salt water, allowing that warm salt water to move through the tank as a unit without breaking down and mixing. Fresh water can't and won't do that, but salt water will. As you start introducing fresh water into the tank, the ability of that conveyor of that warm and salt water to maintain the thermal barrier starts breaking down and the water starts blending together. It's the introduction of fresh water, reducing the salinity of the oceans of the world, that broke the Gulf Stream. And this fresh water is coming from freshwater melting ice in Greenland, which most people are aware of, the massive melting there, and in the Antarctic. The melting ice in the Arctic Ocean is floating salt water, so it doesn't change either the level of the water or the salinity, either one. So this introduction of melting freshwater ice from Greenland and the Antarctic, reducing the salinity of the oceans, is what started causing the Gulf Stream to break down. And, of course, oil does the same thing as fresh water. It breaks down that thermal barrier between the warm and cold water and doesn't work anymore. So that's where we are, gentlemen, and that's the reason why. And the powers that be back in 1979, they knew, when they found Nibiru back then, they knew that one of the many effects would be a warming of the planet. So they keyed onto that as a cover story. And, of course, they created a cover story saying that cow flatulence and automobile emissions and other things using the wrong light bulbs are causing the planet to warm up. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's an event that's being caused by interaction with Nibiru. The planet's warming up from the inside out. In fact, the ice at Greenland is melting from the bottom, not from the top. And the same thing in the Antarctic. The ice is melting from the bottom, not from the top. Which, of course, if it was cow flatulence, automobile emissions, and wrong light bulbs, it'd be melting from the top down, wouldn't it, gentlemen?
It's interesting. We have heard about Nibiru or Planet X, and one of the things. See, this is why we kind of are a little bit skeptical, and we tend to be sitting on the fence. Now, I'm pretty sure that there is a Nibiru or Planet X, but I'll tell you why, John. Because there was a chap last year, chap on the internet called Alexander Rantrov. That's his name, Steve, is it?
That's right, yeah.
And he was talking about Nibiru coming in, and I think it was around September, October, and he was saying it's going to hit or it's going to affect the planet and all this doom and gloom stuff and, everything else, and nothing happened.
Right. Well, naming dates is a dangerous thing. I got caught up in that a bit myself with a fellow talk show host where we were quoting a gentleman who was giving some dates, as opposed to supporting those dates ourselves. And so it's dangerous business. The serious researchers like myself, Professor McCanney, and others, we don't name any dates. At least we haven't yet. There's been nothing to base naming any dates on. We just look at it as something that will happen in the future, and that, quite frankly, with the Gulf Stream having stopped and its effect on the jet stream, I refer to this as the second most important story in 2,000 years, the first one being the birth of our Lord Jesus, this one being the second, because it changes everything, gentlemen. It changes agriculture in the entire northern hemisphere, which, of course, is where most of the food is grown. The southern hemisphere, by contrast, it grows a very small proportion of the world's food. So the dramatic change in food growing by itself is enough to change everything, the way we live, how we allocate spending our money, whether we choose to grow food or not grow food at our home place. It's going to be a dramatic change in everything in the northern hemisphere.
It's kind of scary stuff, John, when you think about it, because one of the gentlemen that both Alan and myself, we know him. We've known him a couple of years, and we had a conversation with him. I'd say it must be 2 years ago. He's actually going to be coming up on the show. I think he's on next week. But I hadn't actually heard of Nibiru, and it was actually Deg. He kind of gave us. We went down to his home one evening, and he gave us a mind-blowing education. Well, it was mind-blowing for me because it was something I hadn't heard about before. But he certainly opened my mind.
Well, Stephen, when you're first exposed to this, it can be overwhelming, and to the point where your brain almost shuts down. It flies in the face of everything we think of as being the way the world is and the way the world works, on one hand. On the other, the British government, Irish government, all the major world's governments have been preparing for this since 1979 by building shelters to house people, and, of course, we all know about the seed bank up in Norway.
Norway, yeah.
Where we're putting all the seeds of the world. Imagine this: building a very large concrete underground structure on an island at the edge of the Arctic Circle, where there's no ready-mix plant for concrete, there's no hotels or restaurants for your workers, there's no electricity, there's no nothing.
Brilliant.
Everything has to be brought in by boat or airplane.
Yeah.
And they built this thing in a matter of just a few months. They were really in a big hurry. So yes, it would be very mind-blowing, Steve, and that's the expected response for any normal adult first exposed to this. And many of them just go into just flat denial once they're exposed to it and say, "I can't. This is too much. I'm just going to walk away from this issue."
Yeah, well, if my mind hadn't have been open at the time, John, I probably would have had that kind of response you just described. But I was lucky in a sense that my mind was fairly open, so I was able to kind of take the information in, kind of put it in a little box in my brain until I was ready to do some more research on it. But just a couple of comments have come in, John. One says, now I actually thought this was it's a question. I It says Nibiru, the home world of the Niburians, our parent race, and then a question mark. That's from Firebrand.
Well, I have a few more questions coming out from TNS, which I'll mention. Basically, somebody said that they have received their bills in for next year for their allotment, and they've gone up double the price, which is very strange. If they have an allotment, let me see. I thought we were still waiting for Nibiru to arrive. We are still waiting for Nibiru to arrive. Let me just see what else is on here.
Right, well, while you're seeing what else on there, I'll just read out this other one from Lord Vapor. He said Nibiru was known by the ancient Babylonians. So it's obviously it's been going back.
That's right. Well, Zechariah Stitchin, who died 2 years ago this fall, he could pick up Babylonian clay tablets and read them off the newspaper. You take one look at this guy, you can see he spent most of his life inside a library. As far as human-type people living on this object, there's persistent stories and records of that. I don't typically dwell on it too much myself. It's enough to have to consider the consequences of a 1 million mile passage within our solar system, and the consequences of that, without getting into whether or not we have ancient relatives on Nibiru. That would be quite a shock, to say the least.
Well, if we do have relations on them, I'd say in the next couple of years we're going to get to meet them anyway.
Well, something's going to give, I think, because there's so much, I'd say in the next few years. We know it said about the alignment of the planets on 2012. Now, that's the alignment, but I'm not saying anything other than the alignment. And there's a lot of, there is a lot of things going on at the moment. I mean, the seed bank in Norway does raise a question. And one of the things they said about the reason why they built it in Norway, apparently, is because it's a natural cooler. So if they don't have any electricity or any power, because of the coldness in Norway with this on this island, the seeds will be naturally frozen. John, that was That's why they picked that location.
Well, let me give you I don't know in detail what's going on in the British Isles. My understanding is the British government has moved a lot of critical government offices to high ground in the interior of the country. Other than that, I'm not sure what's going on over there. Now, in the States, the federal government has been moving intelligence agencies and other parts of what they call continuity of government to Denver, Colorado, which has become, or will be, I should say, the new national capital of the United States once Washington, D.C. is underwater. And anybody can look up and do a simple Google search and find that the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, National Security Agency, and others have moved from their headquarters in Langley, Virginia, and other places on the East Coast to Denver in the last 7 years. The cover stories that they give are laughable. The CIA first said that they were doing it to break up the good old boy network that's been in place for so many decades. Even their own people were laughing at that. Now they just say, quote unquote, for operational reasons. It's extremely disruptive when you start moving tens of thousands of your employees, their families, all their household possessions, more than 1,000 miles across the country. Extremely disruptive. And you would not undertake something like that unless you've got no choice. And they have no choice. They're doing it now because they have no choice. And the government, the federal government of the United States, has literally spent billions of dollars getting ready for this and preparing for it with shelters and relocating people and all their equipment.
And what about the Canaries, John? Can you talk a bit about that?
Well, the Canary Islands off the coast of Africa, they have a ridge of rock and dirt that's kind of aimed towards North America, the United States, and Canada like a big shotgun or a big cannon. In previous times, not in historic times, but in prehistoric times, there have been earthquakes that have shook loose that ridge of rock and granite falling into the ocean. They call it a tidal wave that wiped out the east coast of North America. That tidal wave would be several hundred feet tall. It would travel at not quite the speed of sound, taking about 8 hours to cross the Atlantic Ocean before it would hit North America. It has happened in the past. There's great concern that it could happen in the near future, given the amount of seismic and volcanism that's going on in the Canary Islands right now. So it's a very clear and present danger to North America. I don't believe the tidal wave would affect the British Isles, though.
Okay, because obviously we've heard a little bit different to that we would be affected, and it'd come up from the south up to us, and there's obviously talk about these pole shifts as well. And I'm not saying this is definite. I'm just saying what people are saying on the internet. And one of the things that they said was that with the actual plates moving, the plates of the Earth moving, that Ireland will possibly drop 150 feet. So that means that if you're not, if you're under 150 feet on land in Ireland, which is obviously going to be the coast, then obviously you'll get hit by, the rising sea levels. Right.
Well, for North America, in general around the world, the U.S. Navy says 400 feet is a good elevation to be above, 400 feet above sea level, to be safe. I generally double that just to be safe for the people I consult with and make it 800 feet. I'm not sure what that would be in meters off the top of my head. But these oceans, when they come out, they're going to wipe out everything at the lower elevations. They'll just be wiped out.
Yeah, because, one of the things, I was just going to say that, where we are, we affectionately call our mountain Walton's Mountain here. And where we are located at the moment, it's 520 feet above sea level. But down the road from us, we have a mountain, which is literally about 5 minutes, 10 minutes away from us, which is probably about 1,300 feet above sea level.
Well, I would think that would be a great place to be if these oceans come out, wouldn't it?
Definitely. Well, I think 520 feet is quite good, but you never know. As you say, it's probably better to play safe. But we're not too bad. We're not too bad in that. Now, obviously, what you're saying is that things are going to get worse if Nibiru does come in to the planet and start, because we already know that the magnetic poles are changing, and animals that would normally migrate, their magnetics are all mixed up, where you'd have, we found whales being beached, and they shouldn't be there, and the reason why they're there, chances are because where they would normally migrate to, because of the magnetics, they're just following what they normally follow.
Right, magnetic north has been moving towards Siberia, and that rate of movement has been accelerating. The aviation authorities have had to order the repainting of the numbers in all the runways worldwide. Those numbers represent the magnetic heading of that particular runway. So 47 would be 47 degrees, for example. And what you're saying is very true, Alan. Animals are getting confused because their magnetic steering mechanism, navigation system, is not working because of magnetic north moving. And it's really messing a lot of these animals up, especially the big ones like the whales, like you mentioned.
Yeah, definitely. And we spoke to another radio host in America, Dave Corso from Wolf Spirit Radio, who's an ex-military guy as well. And he actually said to me that, he said, the sky is changing. He said, where the planets used to be or where the stars used to be, he said, they're not there anymore. So he said, something's going on.
I'm sorry, Alan, but I lost the feed there. I cannot hear you.
Yeah. Can you hear me now, 1, 2?
I can now.
Yeah.
I can now.
Yeah, I was just saying there that I was speaking to...
I'm not so sure how much stock to put in that, Alan, because that would mean a true north has moved as opposed to magnetic north. I get these reports also about the sun's coming up and setting in different places. The only way that can happen is for true north to move. Magnetic north cannot make those phenomena happen. I'm not quite ready to believe until I talk to somebody with more credentials like Professor McKinney that that's actually the case.
Okay, and now let's just have a chat about, obviously, with everything that's going on in America and over here in Europe with the austerity and everything else, food prices we know are going up, and we were told this a year and a half ago by Pastor Lindsay Williams. He said this would all be happening. And I know in your show you talk a lot about survival. Are you talking about the climate change, or are you talking about austerity that's going on in America? I mean, what's coming down the line?
Well, actually, one's basically the same as the other. Right now, what's in our face is food prices. And people need to be aware that this is not going to be a temporary setback. These food prices increases are going to be permanent in terms of our lifetimes. So people need to be adjusting their lifestyle accordingly so that they can not get upside down on meeting their monthly and weekly financial obligations. Anything you can cut back on, you need to be looking at that. For example, many people have cable television that they pay a monthly fee for. Well, that's not mandatory. That's an optional thing. And there's probably any number of things, discretionary spending matters that people engage in that they can either cut back on or eliminate or figure out a less expensive way to do it. For example, I know here in the States, many public libraries have movies, DVD movies that you can check out at no charge to entertain yourself and not have to have that expense of paying for cable television. So people need to be creative to cut back on expenses, increase income, and look at possibly growing their own food. Even if you have an apartment, you could get a 5-gallon bucket and grow some tomatoes or some other vegetable in them on your deck or porch, whatever you've got. So it's going to take some creativity to come out of this and not get harmed too bad.
I think so. I think obviously with the listener on TNS chat facility said his allotment price went up twice the price for the renewal of the bill. Steve, there's a couple of questions there coming in. Do you want to take them?
Excuse me. Yes, there are a couple of questions and a couple of comments. I'll just throw this one at you first, John. I came in there a little while ago. Question: could you ask John if he is a Christian? Not sure.
I am. I am. I openly and publicly profess my belief in our Lord Jesus. Yes, sir.
Okay, that answers that one. What is next? LV Lord Vapor says, according to Leo Zagami, the pole shift stuff is a red herring. I don't know if you have any comment on that.
Well, there have been pole shifts in the past, and that's well known, scientifically proven. If you dig down far enough in the permafrost of Alaska, you find tropical plants and tropical animals that were buried there many, many years ago. So we know that's happened in the past, and it will happen in the future. Magnetic north is already moving dramatically, and what happens, gentlemen, is true north catches up with magnetic north, typically in a period of maybe 1 to 3 days when the shift of true north happens. Hopefully it won't be that dramatic. If it's not more than 4 or 5 degrees, we won't be too bad. We're more likely going to have a 17 to 20 degree pole shift, however, of true north.
Right, okay. Well, they do say that the Earth itself is at a tilt of about 23 degrees, I believe, and part of this is part of the rebalancing of the planet, and this has happened 4 times before or something like that, and this is the 5th time it's going to happen. As you say, if you look back at the records, they will show that this has happened. As you say, when you dig down, you see tropical plants where they weren't, they aren't there now. But yeah, it's just curious. We have a listener here saying that just out of the movements you're saying from the actual coast, that Denver is the highest altitude city in the U.S. Is that right?
It's the highest altitude major city in the United States. Yes.
Okay. And
it's the nickname is the Mile High City, so it's 5,000 feet above sea level.
Wow, that's high. And of course, they have the so-called underground base there as well in Denver, I believe.
The Denver airport, they moved enough dirt to build a brand new Panama Canal.
Wow.
They didn't even need a new airport. And I know we're just about out of time here, but if you watched the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the hero is looking for the place where the aliens are going to meet the human beings, and they give grid coordinates, latitude and longitude, of where the aliens are going to meet the human beings. They say it's Devil's Tower. which is that huge flat top rock out there in the American West. It turns out the latitude and longitude they give in this film is the exact center of the brand new Denver airport, which wasn't built for another 15 to 20 years.
Right, okay. And what about all the murals in Denver airport? Very kind of, I won't say satanic, but just weird.
They are weird. They're disturbing. They're weird. They're out of keeping with, people getting ready to fly airplanes. You want to have artwork that will calm them down and put them at ease. Not have artwork showing people being murdered and dead and
exactly.
What a bizarre thing to have in an airport.
Why are they there? Because we had Jesse Ventura. He went in and started investigating in Denver, and of course the security people came over and wanted them to leave, and he was asking why are these murals, and obviously the Masonic G was there as well.
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot more to this Denver airport than meets the eye. Now, back in May, it was announced that 24 Russian Special Forces soldiers would be training with our soldiers to take over the CIA headquarters at the Denver airport. Within 2 weeks of that announcement, we found out that there were going to be a couple of hundred at Fort Carson, Colorado, which is not far from the Denver airport. And we've since found out there's going to be many, many hundreds of Russian Special Forces troops in various forts around the United States. We've confirmed this through multiple independent sources, by the way. We learned about 2 or 3 weeks ago that in violation of the protocols that were set up, the Russian Special Forces soldiers are now communicating with their higher headquarters in Russia using encrypted methods, which is in complete violation of the protocols that they agreed to when they came here for their alleged training purposes. So there's a lot to this, gentlemen, that isn't well known publicly. I talk about it a lot on my radio show. There's some other radio talk show hosts in the States that are talking about it. We reach a tiny percentage of the population in the United States, maybe 0.5% on a good day. So there's a lot to this. What other questions do we have?
Well, we've plenty of time, John. If you want, we've another 30 minutes. If you're okay to talk.
Oh, sure. Oh, well, I thought it was only an hour, but sure, I'll hang on another 30 minutes or even another hour if we need to.
Yeah, that's great. No, it's a 2-hour show normally, and we normally run, up to 9. But we have the guest on for about another, say, 30, 45 minutes. If that's okay with you, John.
That's fine. Let's go.
Brilliant. Okay. Yeah, the one thing I was going to say to you is about, and a lot of people don't actually know about this, and it's not being reported in the media, is that there are Russian and Chinese troops in America.
Right. Well, we haven't got any or very much reports of Chinese inside the United States. We've got multiple reports of Chinese just across our southern border in Mexico. And most of that has to do with logistics, equipment and supplies. Now, just south of Laredo, Texas, there's a Chinese military base that has probably 50,000 Chinese troops that we're aware of. Now, as far as Russians being in this country, yes, it's been documented, and we have multiple reliable witnesses putting hundreds of Russian Special Forces troops inside the United States right now, allegedly for training purposes. Quite frankly, I don't believe it. I think they're here for another reason that does not serve the best interests of the people of this country.
And you're very big on saying to people, make sure you have weapons and ammunition and stuff like that, just in case something goes down.
Well, here in the States, we can freely buy as many firearms and as much ammunition as we like, and I encourage people to do so. We don't have anywhere near the restrictions that you have in the United Kingdom, which is kind of ironic because all laws in the United States have their foundation in English common law, which up until about a century ago, the English, British, and Scots could own all the weapons that they wanted to own, and that's changed in the last 100 or so years to where you have some of the most severe firearms restrictions on the planet. In fact, in much of former communist East Europe, it's easier to buy firearms than it is not only in the British Isles, but also in the United States. a friend of mine escaped Czechoslovakia in the mid-'80s before the Iron Curtain came down. When he went back on a visit a couple of years ago, he came back and told me. He says, John, you can buy a pistol easier in the Czech Republic than you can in the United States.
Well, it's the same over here. The UK is the same. Well, Ireland is the same. We have restrictions over here with the buying weapons, and you wouldn't be able to go in and do that. Even if you're in a gun club, you'd probably find it hard to actually get a weapon. So you're going to, for people who want to have some kind of protection, because I mean, if you look at what's happening now at the moment, look at the dollar, look at the euro. If that goes down, and they say I think I said before it was 3 days, but to be honest with you, I'd probably say 3 hours away from having no food on the shelves, because as soon as people realise they'd be down to the local shop and the shelves would be emptied, and then if the people who don't make it down there or don't have stores of food, myself and Steve have a little store of food, and a few of the bits and pieces that we have just as a backup, just in case.
No guns, though.
No guns, but we have to sort something out. But we have a store of food, and we have said to our listeners to make sure you have a store of food. And if nothing happens, then look, you just have extra food which you can use. But if something happens,
right.
You have it. So it's important.
Of course, I read the news reports from England, Ireland, Scotland also, and of course the criminals have always had their guns and never gave them up. Men and women who import cocaine by the ton can certainly get all the weapons that they want, can't they?
Definitely. And then we just have to be careful, because, as you said earlier, John, on the show, that food prices are actually going up at the moment. It's getting more expensive, and with everything else that the governments are trying to do, the austerity that they're trying to impose on the Irish people here, with all the new taxes coming out, and I know you guys have as well. You have the Obamacare which came out, and people are really, really struggling globally. And
they are.
It's just funny that some people still can't see it. And one of the questions I was going to say to you was, when did it dawn on you that something was afoot, something was going on that just didn't, just didn't match up? When did you realise that?
About the third week, I was doing classified studies of the Vietnam War in 1967.
Right, okay, that's gone back a while.
I understood real quick that the war I was fighting was not the war people thought I was fighting, that things were very strange, and that it was quite a shock for I was just turned 20 2 weeks before I went to Vietnam, for a 20-year-old young man from the Midwest of the United States to find out that his government was doing things that nobody knew about. And it was kind of simmered there for a long time, but in 1988, another former intelligence analyst, a very dear friend, gave me a book to read that I highly recommend. The title of it is The Unseen Hand by Ralph Epperson, Epperson, The Unseen Hand by Ralph Epperson. Many libraries carry it. It documents the involvement of the powers that be behind the scenes the last 200 years or so in the starting and ending wars, starting and ending depressions, starting and ending countries, and what their real agenda has been and how they've done this. So it was a wake-up call for me, and that was 1988, and it was off to the races after that in terms of my being politically involved, becoming aware to the point where I became a radio talk show host in January 1995, in addition to my other responsibilities.
And have you got, is there any trouble that you have received from anybody? Have you been, wiretaps or anything like that?
No trouble of any consequence, gentlemen. It's probably cost me some business, but that's okay. I do private investigative work for attorneys, solicitors, as you call them over there, and it may have cost me some business, but I'm okay with that. That's what I signed up for, and I have no problem with that.
Okay. One of the things that you said on your show, John, was that you would contact your daughter and you would actually get her to make a move and come to you because of your elevation, your high up. Have you got plans to do that, or is she coming down to you, or when do you think that might happen?
Well, I'm very concerned about the second and third and fourth weeks of October, and I talk to her frequently about these matters, and I let her know that I won't ask her to come down here unless there's no choice, because it's just so incredibly disruptive to a family. She has a boy who's in his second year of high school, twin boy and girl who are in the first grade, and of course her husband has his career and she has her career. So she understands the seriousness of this, and that I won't ask her to make that disruptive move to her family unless there's absolutely no choice.
Okay, and you're looking at the second or third week in October, and I mean, again, I understand the whole date thing, because we're going to have Drake on the show in a few weeks' time, and he has been jumped on by people given a date, and they're saying, oh, you give us a date and nothing happened. And as David Wilcox said on our show as well, that he said it's more got to do with the window of opportunity.
Right.
For these people, they don't look at dates, they look at when, if an event's going to happen, they look at the window of opportunity and then do it there. So, assuming...
Well, we have a lot of our sources in the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Defense and military are looking at the possibility of a contrived economic collapse that would be so severe that bank holidays would be declared, which would lead to social disorder. These cards, these debit cards that people on welfare, that poor people use to get their food, would not work anymore. That would lead to civil disorder and martial law being declared. These reports come in from multiple sources that are well placed. They're very concerned with their own well-being and well-being of their families as well. So that's why we're focusing on that time frame of beginning the second week of October, going all the way through past the presidential elections, which is in the first week of November. More reports seem to be focused on the second, third, and fourth week of October than any other time. So that's what we're looking at, and of course we're not going to be telling people or encourage people to do anything that would be harmful to them or their families or their career, but make prudent preparations and do the prudent thing to have a safe haven for their families and make sure they have food and water stored up and medical supplies, a way to defend the family from criminals, and all the things that are right and proper without jeopardizing their economic well-being, jeopardizing their career, or making fools of themselves.
Okay. Well, there was one statement made by a radio show host which I have to agree with, and he said, I'd rather, maybe it was you, John, I don't know, but maybe not, I don't know. I remember hearing it anyway, and they said, I'd rather go and tell people what may happen, and if it doesn't happen, then feel a little bit foolish, than not say anything and have them suffer.
Well, when that comment came another talk show host and myself, Mike Harris, back in the early part of August this year.
That's it.
We were getting a lot of reports about what might be happening with Nibiru. One of them was giving us some dates, and we gave multiple disclaimers in the show, which people have tendency to forget, that nothing may happen on those dates. While at the same time we said exactly what you said, that we felt because of the veracity and the credibility of that one source, which was not corroborated, by the way, we went ahead and went public with it anyway. And typically neither he or I will put out information without corroboration, but this particular source was so well placed in a foreign government that we decided to go ahead and do it anyway. And in hindsight, I'm glad we did, because it stimulated a lot of thought and a lot of activity, Alan, that would not have happened otherwise.
Exactly, and I think it's worthwhile, as long as you put a disclaimer on it. I mean, as I say, people have to realise that it's not about dates, it's about windows of opportunity. And
well, here's another little saying for you. It's better to be 1 year too early than 1 day too late.
Exactly, and and it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
Absolutely.
Which is their other saying. But so you reckon that obviously you had QE3 over there, and Bernanke has obviously supposed to be doing his best, but it's obviously the money goes to the rich again, and people don't benefit. And I think it was a bit of he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't with QE3.
Right. Well, all new money created in the United States has more debt connected to it, so it can never be paid off. That's an illusion. the system that's set up has no alternative but to collapse. This debt-based system has no alternative but to collapse. There is no constitutional basis for this debt-based currency system to exist. The founding fathers of the United States, they'd been through that just a few years before with paper money that had no backing behind it, and it became valueless. And they attempted to set up a system that would be solidly backed by silver and gold that would stand the test of time, which it did up until about 1912, 1913 time frame, when they established the Federal Reserve System, banks in the United States, a private banking system that controls our monetary system, and of course the Internal Revenue Service, which allowed for the taxation of individuals in the United States. So they held out for a little more than a century with good solid currency, and it's been downhill ever since. Of course, Richard Nixon closed the gold window, and the silver window had been closed quite a bit before that, when Lyndon Johnson was president in 1964. Once they went off the gold standard, it's been just an ever rising inflation and decrease in the value of our money here in the States.
And obviously the euro is the same here. There's no difference.
Well, that system was doomed to failure from the beginning. It did not have mechanisms in place that would safeguard the sanctity of the money. The money was backed up with nothing but promises, and they made the temptation to borrow more than they could pay back too great for some of these countries. And they did. It's human nature to do that if you can do it and try to get away with it. So it's an unfortunate circumstance, and my understanding of what's going on in Europe with the euro and these economies is that it's complete chaos right now.
Oh, they're trying to kick the can down the road by doing a quantitative easing over here, but they're taking the money out of thin air and obviously just putting it out and giving it to whoever needs it. But at the end of the day, they can't keep doing that because they're going to create inflation because the value of the currency is going to go down.
Exactly.
So, and which is what's happening in America as well. So it's this calculation of how the maths work out financially is finite. It comes to an end, and we're near the end of it. If not, we're there now, and they're just, as I say, kicking the can down the road. But Steve, you got a couple of questions there.
Excuse me. I have a comment and a question. I do apologise. These are kind of backtracking a little bit because they did kind of disappear off the screen here, and I'm afraid out of sight, out of mind with me. One is from Lord Vapor, and it's in relation to floods. He said the world will never be flooded again, according to the Rainbow Covenant promise. I'm guessing that's something that's connected to the Bible. That's a comment. If you want to comment on that, John, you're more than welcome. And
400 feet above sea level is not the world. It's where probably 70% of the people live, but the world's land masses will not be flooded. It'll be coastal areas that'll be flooded. So it won't be a worldwide flood where everything's underwater. It'll be coastal areas up to 400 feet above sea level being flooded.
Yeah. And kind of tied into that as well, one from Shane, when we spoke about the thing that may happen in the Canaries and the tidal wave or the tsunami that would follow. Shane says, this great wave in the past, when did this happen in the past, and is there proof?
Well, there's proof, and that's pretty mainstream science. It's not tinfoil hat conspiracy theories. I can't tell you the date. It's been many centuries ago. The proof exists on the east coast of North America, and they found the bones of whales washed inland, for example, when this happened, and other marine life far inland that should not have been there otherwise. In Texas, for example, there's lots of seashells found 80 and 90 miles from the coast. So there's lots of evidence this has happened in the past.
Okay, that's okay. So you asked questions there. Yeah. Well, Donna, we just have to see. As I say, I think people are going to have to prepare, and because even away from the whole kind of flooding pole shift thing that's going on, with the banking system, which we can all see and see what's going on, I think they definitely have to. They definitely have to be prepared for that, especially with the increase in food prices.
Right. Well, let me give you a couple of things that people might be able to do to protect themselves. And I don't know about your laws over there about some of this stuff, but people involved in boating, whether it's sport boating or commercial fishermen, they have what they call flares and flare launchers. Now, a flare launcher is not a gun. It's a flare launcher. And they look like a pistol, quite frankly. They look like a very large bore, single shot, sometimes two shot pistol. The modern ones are painted orange. Now imagine this, Alan. Imagine the power it takes to shoot 1 ounce of burning magnesium 100 meters straight up. That's a lot of power.
Okay.
Magnesium burns at about 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know what that is centigrade, but it burns really, really hot. There's nothing like a face full of burning magnesium to kind of ruin your whole day, if you know what I mean. Now, in the States, you can walk in any boat supply or marine supply store and buy a flare launcher and buy all the flares you want and just lay down your cash and walk out the door. And I talked to American truckers. American truckers are prohibited from having firearms in commercial vehicles. And I urge them to arm themselves with flare launchers. Another possibility would be your local hardware store. We have something in the States they call wasp and hornet spray, which is a canister of insecticide under pressure that will shoot a stream of wasp and hornet insecticide spray, about 3 to 4 meters, straight out.
Wow.
You really don't want that stuff in your face. I mean, it would be extremely unpleasant, shall we say. So there's a couple of hints there of ways people might be able to protect themselves with common items that could be purchased with no government involvement.
Even like pepper spray, we were told that you could get, one of the things you could do is have, I think it's ammonia you can buy in a local hardware store, and you mix that with water and put it in a water pistol. And it acts like a pepper spray.
Well, that's going to have limited range. You want some power. You don't want these criminals to get too close to you.
Yeah.
You really don't. What about crossbows? Is it possible to own crossbows there?
I don't know whether.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think they're pretty strict over here for.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, over here, teenage boys can buy crossbows if they want to.
John, just a comment in there.
That's a shame. What about pellet rifles?
Well, you can get CO2 pellet-based guns. You don't have to get any license for them.
Well, we have pellet rifles in the States that can shoot deer and kill a deer.
Wow.
Oh yeah, they shoot a half-inch diameter projectile that weighs 200 grains, fast enough to kill a deer, which of course would kill a man. So pellet rifles may be a viable alternative. Also, I haven't really looked into it. Pellet pistols generally aren't very powerful. They don't have enough storage capacity for the air to do anything, to be a serious self-defense piece.
I think we'd have to look at that. But I think probably the pistols with the CO2 canister would probably be ideal because you'll get more power, more kick from it from having the...
Well, a pistol with CO2 canister would not have very much power at all. I would not want to defend my life with one. But what they call pre-charged pneumatic rifle, they're strong enough to shoot a deer, so they're quite powerful.
Well, we'd have to look into that. Steve?
Yeah, I was just going to say a comment up there from Shane. Thanks for that one, Shane. He said, you now need a license to have a flare gun, and you need to be trained. You need to be trained in their use.
I'm so sorry for you people over there.
Yeah, hang on. We have a comment from another listener on TNS saying that in Ireland we have a hurley stick, and it works pretty good.
Yeah, well, you do what you got to do. Common farm implements can do a lot of damage. So you do what you got to do to defend yourself.
Yeah, I mean that's what it'll boil down to. If they're coming down your drive or whatever to attack you. There is a movie out there. I don't know whether people have seen it, called The Road, and I was told to watch it, and it was it was kind of post-apocalyptic scenario where there's a father and a son, and he's on the road. And they're trying to, the idea is he wants to head out to the coast because he feels there'll be a better chance out there. and it goes on his trials and tribulations of what happens after this, the apocalypse. And
I've seen the film twice, and it's a very dark film.
Yeah.
Without a whole lot of optimism. It has I guess, a relatively good ending. The boy does get to a safe haven. It was pretty dismal, wasn't it?
It was pretty depressing. Actually, after I watched it, I was very surprised that the person who knew me wanted me to watch it, because I'm kind of not into movies like that at all. But you get the point behind it, I suppose. You know, at the end of the day, what happens if you're fighting for survival? Right. What do you do, and how do you manage? How do you cope?
Right. Well, that's the father had a goal, and he was totally focused on the goal to the point where he was willing to sacrifice his own life for the survival of his son. So it was certainly a very strong love story in that the love of the father for his son to survive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was a bit morbid, but there was a kind of a story behind it regarding, obviously survival and sorting out, taking care of your family. But one of the things that I also want to talk to you about, John, and I haven't heard you say this in a while on your show, but at the end of some of your shows, you used to have this little secret code or this saying, like he'd say, okay, good day everybody, and by the way, my grandmother's shotgun is rusty or something, and whatever the code was.
Right. That all began with my mimicking what was done in World War II. The BBC would put these broadcasts out to the underground guerrillas working in Europe and France and other places, and they would put out coded messages. For example, the chair is in the window. The chair is in the window. And then the people who needed to know what that message meant, they would know what that message meant, and then they would take action on it. So I started out just saying that, and then I expanded it to have other messages, which are mostly nonsensical. But occasionally I've put out a real message involving real matters that I know will get back to the powers that be and maybe cause them to wonder who my connections are and what I'm up to, and maybe cause some other people to look into some things and be aware of things they would not be aware of otherwise. So it's kind of a little thing. I haven't done that for about 2 or 3 weeks. Alan, you're right. Things have gotten so busy that I've just been kind of distracted.
Okay, we're going to have to come up with some, Steve, at the end of the show.
The chair is in the window.
The chair is in the window. Yeah.
Hang on, the chair is coming through the window.
I like my grandmother's shotgun is rusty.
Alan has a long mustache. It could be anything.
Exactly. Now, tell us, you had a guest on your show there the other week, John, and they rang in and they talked about locks and dams being shut down and obviously a no-fly zone for some VIP people. What was that all about?
Well, that's two different matters. Well, locks and dams being shut down concerns the Mississippi River and the unprecedented low levels of the water, making commercial river traffic not possible because of the water that they draw was more water than was in the river. As far as the no-fly zone, that had to do with Mount Weather. There's a acronym. It's NOTAM, N-O-T-A-M, Notice to Airmen, put out by the Federal Aviation Administration, and they put out a NOTAM concerning a certain radius, I forget what it was, 25 or 30-mile radius, around Mount Weather, which is in Virginia, just outside Washington, D.C. It's one of the shelters built during the Cold War for the continuity of government. And that notice restricting airspace was from about 8 or so in the morning till about 3 p.m. or so in the afternoon to allow for the movement of VIPs, is what the notice said. So we announced that because it was a real thing, and nothing happened that we're aware of. It was probably just a training operation is what it was.
Interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting. Funny enough, you should talk about the continuity of government. We actually had it. It was mentioned in a paper over here, the Irish Independent, probably a couple of months ago, regarding them doing some testing here in Dublin for the continuity of government, because we have a building called Dublin Castle, which is well fortified, which was used in the Rising, and the Leinster House, and where the government ministers, the Dáil Éireann, is not too far away from it. and they were obviously doing some risk assessment and testing for obviously continuity of government. Now, obviously, when people are told that that's happening in Ireland, or when you hear it in general by your government, you have to kind of raise your eyebrow and ask yourself, why are they doing that?
Right. Well, the appropriate thing for any government is to make sure they can have continuity of government. It's also appropriate, in my opinion, for governments to warn their people, warn their citizens when they need to be preparing themselves, which they don't, except in the most cursory manner, general, non-specific manner, encouraging people to have maybe a week's supply of food and water on hand, which is almost nothing. So I don't have a whole lot of faith in these governments to do the right thing and warn their citizens. Now, some of the Scandinavian governments have been a bit better at it. In fact, Norway is one of the ones where they've been much better at alerting their own citizens to get prepared. Most governments, however, simply do not give any warning of any consequence.
Well, I did hear that Russia has built something like 5,000 shelters for its people.
Well, in the early 90s, we found out that Russia was building essentially an underground city in the Ural Mountains, which, since the Cold War was over, made no sense whatsoever. Once we found out about Nibiru, it made perfect sense that they would build an underground city in the Ural Mountains. They have the financial wherewithal with their oil revenues to build underground cities to protect their people, and I have no doubt whatsoever that they've done it.
So we have at the moment, it's funny you should talk about Russia and oil. So we have the Russians supplying oil to China, and they're not using the petrodollar. So the Chinese are using their own currency. Then you have the Indian or Pakistani countries, I think it was India, buying oil off Iran and using gold to do that. So all these petrodollars are going to be coming back to America. And
right.
it just the inflation and the value of the currency is just going to be literally nothing.
It will. There's plenty of historical press that we don't need to go into. Yes.
Okay, let's do a summing up, John. For survival, for you, whether it's Nibiru or whether it's the banking collapse, what do you think? Give us your top 10 tips, or near enough to what people should be doing.
Okay, first of all, is get your spiritual house in order. That's the single most important thing anybody can do. We know from the experience of American and British POWs in World War II that those who had a strong spiritual foundation were far more likely to survive the POW experience than those that did not. After that comes skills. And the two skills that will be most demand and shortest supply will be the two following skills: emergency medical treatment skills and ham radio skills. Any group, whether it's 4 or 5 people or 400 or 500 people, those are the skills that will be in the biggest demand and shortest supply. The other skills are fairly well understood and well known: gardening skills, animal husbandry, all the various construction skills, carpentry, plumbing, electrical work, mechanical skills to repair cars, trucks, and tractors, food service skills, child care skills. There's literally dozens and dozens of skills. But the two skills, once again, to repeat myself, in biggest demand as far as supply will be emergency medical treatment skills and ham radio skills. Get the skills now while you can. Get the equipment and the supplies now while you can. The emergency medical treatment supplies and equipment. The ham radio supplies and equipment. Work on it while we have what appears to be the luxury of time. If you have time for acquisition of other skills, go for it. I'm not sure that there is. Now, I don't know your culture over there that well. Here in the States, there's multiple opportunities to get medical treatment skills from various colleges, fire departments, hospitals offer those kinds of classes. Ham radio, typically you'd want to link up with a ham radio club to get the skills of a ham radio operator. Effective, immediate communications in a fast-moving or even a slow-moving crisis can frequently make the difference between life and death, so that things aren't messed up, mistakes aren't made, because you've got good, effective communications.
Well, as you know, John, the first thing that comes online when there's been a disaster is either ham or CB radio.
That's right.
You know, because it doesn't require a network, it doesn't require satellites. So, assuming that the propagation now, obviously, the other thing that we never really talked about is the EMP or the coronal mass ejection, which they're going to expect, which they said the last one was called the Carrington effect, which is 1859, and they're saying that this is a possibility as well. Right.
The Carrington event in 1859 started fires in telegraph offices all over the United States. There was no nationwide power grid or any power grid at all back then. A similar event now would bring Western civilization to its knees. And of course, it would be half the planet, half the planet unlucky enough to be facing the sun when it hit. Best case scenario would be the Pacific Ocean facing the sun when it hit. But we don't have that option. If it happens, it will cause literally billions of people to die within weeks. For example, once the power grid's down, refrigeration is gone. Now here in the States, 8% of the adults are diabetic. A large percentage of them require refrigerated insulin to stay alive. Everybody who needs a refrigerated prescription product to stay alive, they'll all be dead in 4 to 6 weeks, almost every one of them. You probably have a similar situation over there in Ireland and the British Isles and Europe, where a sizable percentage of the adults and children both take a refrigerated prescription pharmaceutical product to stay alive. That's my reality, Alan. It will be an event that will change society forever if it happens. Now, human beings can create a similar event with electromagnetic pulse weapons and cause the same devastation in terms of knocking out the power grid with the same results. Our Space Administration outfit, NASA, they say that they expect there could be a Carrington event sometime in the next 5 to 6 months, and that's what they're looking at.
Well, can NASA be trusted, though?
I take everything they say with a grain of salt. They're known to lie openly and make things up on one hand. On the other, what harm does it do to prepare for something like that and try to get ready for it?
Well, I know that you sell Faraday bags, and right. They act like a Faraday cage to protect your electronic equipment. And I remember one of the things you mentioned on the show, one of the chaps who sell this kind of is freeze-dried food, freeze-dried guy. You said that the government actually went in, or some department went in and actually bought all the stock.
Yeah, that's been about 4 years ago now. And it wasn't just the United States government; it was other world governments. They bought the entire production of the freeze-dried food industry during that calendar year. Let's see, it's 2012. I believe, Alan, it was 2007. I'm not positive. I'd have to go back through some old emails and look. But they bought that entire year's production from the factories.
That's incredible. That they did that. I mean, looking at all these things, and the other thing that you mentioned on the show was that a lot of these Navy guys who actually have retired in the Ozarks.
That's right. Well, they were told that the Arkansas, Missouri Ozarks was a known safe haven for the following reasons. Altitude above sea level, which typically it's 800 to 1,600 feet above sea level. A long growing season, plenty of water, a very homogeneous population, almost no minorities of any consequence. The American Indians have assimilated so much you can't tell them from Irishmen, so most of them anyway. For those reasons, the Arkansas, Missouri Ozarks are, and of course one more very important, distance from major population centers. The Arkansas, Missouri Ozarks is a vast area with tens of thousands of square miles of area, with only one city of 250,000 people or more. That's Springfield, Missouri. Most of the cities in the Arkansas, Missouri Ozarks are fairly small, of 5, 10, 20,000 people. So low population density is another part of what makes it safe.
Okay, and so you have a lot of retired naval people there. Now,
thousands of retired Navy people and their families.
And this,
my friend Tim Spencer, I probably need to mail you a copy of my DVD, Alan. He's gone public. He saw the map. He saw the Navy classified map of the flooded areas when he was in the Navy, and advised by one of his senior Navy guys that he should move to the Arkansas, Missouri Ozarks because of that map, and he did. He and his wife are from Central Florida. They're both Native Americans, by the way, and they moved to the Arkansas, Missouri Ozarks 25 years ago because of that map. And his testimony is on my second DVD of my DVD set, Global Warming, What the Government Isn't Telling You, available at my website, thelibertyman.com.
That would be great to get a copy of that, because one of the things you said on your show before is that you're talking about a meeting that, I think you mentioned it earlier in the show anyway, the meeting, you said there's a meeting that took place, and they were all kind of chatting and laughing and having a cigarette and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And
yes.
he went into the room and then came out like...
Yes, that goes back to 1979. One of my listeners, he's up in Montana. He was in the Navy. And in 1979, as a young sailor, he was in his mid-20s in 1979, he was in New Orleans working with the Navy, doing his work, when he got orders to set up a briefing room for a weekend briefing of admirals. And he says, John, admirals don't do weekend briefings. These are flag rank officers, the equivalent of generals, of course. So he sets up the meeting room with the light system, the sound system, the tables, chairs, and so forth. And there was a map on the wall. The map had markings on which were strange. He didn't know what they meant. Nobody told him because he wasn't going to be in the briefing. So he's outside the briefing room when these admirals start showing up. And they're all joking and kidding each other, telling jokes, smoking cigars, slapping each other on the back, inquiring about each other's families. These men have known each other for decades, typically 20-plus years. At their point in their career where, they're kind of enjoying life as admirals and all the things that go along with that. So they walk to the briefing room, and when they come out, nobody's laughing, nobody's joking. They all look like their puppy dogs that died. They just got one of the very first briefings, Alan, about Nibiru and the rising ocean levels that would happen during their lifetimes. Now, the majority of the Navy veterans aren't told about Nibiru. They're not even told why these oceans will come out of their basins. They're just told that they will come out of their basins, and they would come out during their lifetimes. The Navy veterans, when they retire, Alan, they get their 5 acres or 10 or 100 acres or whatever they buy and establish a new lifestyle and home in the Arkansas, Missouri Ozarks, and they develop a self-sufficient lifestyle. And you know what, Alan? They don't worry about a date. They don't need to think about a date because they're ready, and they don't need to anguish over a date. That's really a good place to be, isn't it?
It is. It sounds pretty good. Sounds pretty good to me. And I take it that obviously you've taken that on board and you've got organised yourself.
Oh yes, yes. I work with several families to be prepared, and we've made fairly decent preparations. Not quite at the level of the federal government, of course, but fairly decent in terms of having a shelter and being able to grow food and have plenty of water and all that kind of thing.
And have you come across any resistance from people when you've actually spoken to them and said, gave them this information? What's the kind of response from people?
Typically, people don't want to hear about it, even members of my own family, and that's pretty much expected. Alan, I came to this realization of the human response of denial when I was warning the guys in my outfit in the fall of 1967 about the coming Tet Offensive at the end of January 1968. I warned them that it would be coming, that we needed to store up water and food and ammunition. Very few of them did so. Of course, they all regretted it the morning of the Tet Offensive beginning, but by then it was too late. As the old saying goes, once again, better be a year too soon than a day too late. It was after the Tet Offensive began in 1968, we couldn't get food, we couldn't get water, we couldn't get ammunition. That was hopeless at that point. Whatever we had is what we had. We ended up sharing meals, sharing ammunition, and we did have enough water, so that really wasn't too much of an issue.
Okay, so just to recap, John, that we're looking at what you feel is going to be the second or third week of October.
We're looking at that as a possibility. We hope it doesn't matter. hope it doesn't happen. If a financial collapse begins, that'll be my signal to alert my daughter that she needs to get out of Dodge, as we say here in the States, and get down here to where it'll be safe in the Arkansas, Missouri Ozarks.
Yeah, because I don't know whether it was on your show, John, that, or I heard that the election is not going to happen in the States because of some event which will stop it from happening.
That's one of the several scenarios.
Yeah.
Is that there will be an event so severe that martial law will be declared and there will be no election. That's one of several scenarios that we're hearing.
And Obama
it could be a
power.
financial collapse. It could be a nuclear event in this country, a nuclear weapon or a dirty bomb going off, or possibly start of World War III. We're having troops being called up right now to go to another war.
That's incredible. It was Lindsey Williams, was it, Steve? Who said that?
Pastor Lindsey Williams told us that.
He said that there wouldn't be an election, there'd be an event, because Obama wants to stay in power, so there'll be an event before the election, which will stop.
That's a way to guarantee staying in power, isn't it?
Yeah. And then, obviously, an event before the election. Now, if Lindsay's saying that, now he's got, obviously, he said he has connections to the elite, and this is what they've told him. And he's saying, obviously, about the elections. And then, if you didn't know about this, and you're saying this from your people, then obviously...
Lindsey Williams has friends in high places. I got friends in low places.
There's a song in there. There's a song in there somewhere. I think.
Both our friends are saying the same thing, essentially.
Yeah, but they're both saying the same thing, that something's going to go off. And with the way things are at the moment with Europe and the QE3 happening, I think it will. I mean, in the next few months, I do think we're going to see an awful lot happening. What's going to happen, I don't know, but I think we will see an awful lot going down. But I will say, John, it's been fantastic having you on the show. And this is exactly why... Oh, hang on, we have one more question for you, I think.
We do. This is a personal question from me, just something that I'm interested in, John. I don't know if it's something that you may be able to maybe just shed a little bit of light on, but it's something that's kind of it's interested me for a long time, and I've heard some of the footage and I've seen loads of information, and it's kind of scary stuff. And that's number stations. When you were talking about the likes of Russia and all that, I've heard about these number stations. Is that you're familiar with?
Number stations? I'm not sure. Could you be more
on the amateur stuff? Yeah,
it's it's usually very low down on shortwave frequencies, and you just hear tones or a buzzer would go off all the time, and eventually, I think the last one was a couple of years ago, but there's a buzzer that goes off. I think it's on 4625 kilohertz, and it's just there all the time, and every couple of years you'll hear a woman's voice in Russian, and she calls out a series of numbers, and then it just goes back to buzzing again 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Well, this is the first I've heard of that, Steve. It sounds like some kind of... they want to keep that frequency for themselves, and they keep it jammed up all the time, so when they want to use it, nobody else can use it. That's just my first thought off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think if you go to Google and type in number stations, John, you'll get some samples on YouTube as to what the number stations are, and what you'll hear the sound. And there is a kind of what people perceive as to be codes that this lady reads out, and any agents that are actually anywhere around in certain countries, they can transcribe the codes to, from a message from headquarters, so to speak. That's kind of what people are talking about.
You'd wonder, though, wouldn't you?
You would wonder.
In this day and age with technology that we have, would they? I would kind of agree with what John has said there. I would agree with you that it's obviously the frequency that maybe 20 or 30 years ago it was being used for a purpose, but now it's not. But they just want to keep it blocked. So this
is on HF, high frequency.
It's on HF, yeah. I think it's
that's
460.
That's where I'd expect it to be.
Yeah.
This may be a holdover from some program that really served a purpose. I don't know why they'd still be spending money on that. HF is still a very effective way to communicate, though, of course.
Yeah, definitely. Well, John, it's been a fantastic and honor and privilege having you on the show. Thanks for coming on. It's much appreciated. We did want to get the information
Give
out.
me your mailing address, Alan, so I can get my DVD in the mail to you.
Yeah.
Send it to me in an email or something.
I'll send it to you in an email. That'd be fantastic to look at. But again,
Okay.
once again, thanks, John. And we're going to pass you over to
welcome.
Steve. And Steve will go through all your bits and pieces, get your website and all that.
Okay, sounds good.
He
Thanks,
says that.
gentlemen. Have a good evening.
John, he says that every time. I'll go through your bits and pieces. It sounds like I'm going to crawl into your house and go through your drawers or something. But no.
I understood what he meant.
All right. No, it's just normally
Thank you, gentlemen.
at this end of the show, at the end of the interview, we generally just kind of give out your web address again. Now, I know it's thelibertyman.com, but if there's anything else, any closing statements that you feel might be important, just go for it now.
Well, I just want to encourage people to pay attention, to get their spiritual house in order, start working on their skills, and lay in a supply of food, and have, if they don't have a proprietary source of water, lay in a good supply of water as well.
Exactly. So if you have a well and stuff like, I mean, the more self-sufficient you are, the better it's going to be for people.
Absolutely.
That's really what it boils down to. The more, because we don't know how long, if it does go off, we don't know how long it's going to take. So the more food and water you have, the longer you can survive, the better. Just to be on the safe side. But all right, John, stay with us there for a minute, and we're just going to go off to a musical break.
This is Open Your Mind Radio on OYMIreland.com, CNSRadio.me.com and ICRadioNetwork.com.
And we're back. A little bit of John Parr there, St. Elmo's Fire. Love that song. That's where I played it. A great interview there with Mr. John Moore. Lovely guy. We was chatting to him there during the musical interlude, and a nicer man you couldn't meet.
So don't forget, if you want to go over and listen to John's show, it's on every day of the week, 1 p.m. GMT. On the website is thelibertyman.com, and you just click on the player and off you go. Really, that's it. Now there is a show on before John, so you can listen to the previous show for the first few minutes, and then John kicks in and then does his show. And he has interesting guests on as well. And there's a lady that is a ham operator, and she comes on every now and again, and she seems to have a kind of scientific background, or seems to know a lot about the science anyway. And she comes on and talks to John about a few bits and pieces, which is quite interesting. So, as I say, check it out and see what you think yourself. Does this information resonate with you? I mean, that's what you have to ask yourself. I mean, I know everybody has different opinions on Nirabu and what we were told last year about Alexander Ratrov, and get your things ready, September the 26th, I think it was. And even myself and Steve at the time, if you remember, for the people who remember our show last year, we were saying, 26th, we better get ready, and then there's another date, and then there's another date, and nothing happened. So we're not saying nothing will happen, but on them dates, nothing did happen, and that's a year down the line.
I think the only thing happened was we got a numb bum from sitting on the fence.
We did. We got a numb bum, and we got splinters
as well, yeah.
So, but apart from the kind of whole pole shift thing that's going on at the moment, I think we can take it that the dollar and the euro is definitely a dead duck in the water, where everything's going on, and the food prices are actually going up as well. So, I mean, you just have to bear that in mind. And of course, with Hoganism, as we're going to, as one radio DJ calls Hoganism, which is Phil Hogan, and his bully boy tactics, trying to get people to pay the household tax, and basically they're trying to use the land registry, and you'll be getting a letter off Phil Hogan or off obviously through the Inland Revenue, because the Inland Revenue, I think, have been given permission to actually. I think
that's going to kick off next year, as far as I know, 2013.
2013. So if the banking system collapses, well then we mightn't see it, because.
Best of luck, Phil.
Best of luck, Phil, trying to get your money when
I tell you, if the whole banking system collapses and we have like that Botswana dollar, we'd probably have plenty of money anyway. You go up and say, here, Phil, there you go, 100, there's 200. Best of luck.
Exactly, yeah, because it won't be worth anything.
Yeah, but I wonder if the excrement does hit the fan and money is worth nothing, and all the people who have registered their property as one thing is a Crown Copyright would generally say, and good evening Crown Copyright, I see it in the list, once we've registered the land, then technically the government doesn't need you to, once you've registered, they technically own it anyway.
Well, suddenly Lord Vapor said that he'd love to own one of them notes for a laugh. Actually, Lord Vapor, if you go onto eBay and type Botswana dollar, you can probably buy one. Because I went on a couple of weeks ago and they had them up there for sale, and I think you had to pay $5. Now these notes are worth nothing. They literally aren't. But for the hell of having one and showing people $1 trillion note, I mean, it's a bit of a a party piece, something to talk about, you know. But just to remind people that we're up and running on Facebook now. Okay, so you can pop along. We have posted some information, thanks to a listener who sent in the information regarding the household tax septic tank charge. It's on our Facebook page. Even Ming is on there. And you can go over to facebook.com/OYM Internet Radio, and that's the Facebook page. And if you like that, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, we had to kind of re-invoke the Facebook page because we were concerned that the likes of the FBI and the CIA weren't getting all of the information that we were putting out. So we said, get up on Facebook so we can be sure that they know that we know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, get the information on there. So thanks again for the donations. Keep them coming in. We're nearly there with the frequency counter. And when we get that in, we just have to do the training with Lars and Jesse, and then we can crack on with offering the scanning as well, which is something that we're going to try and fit in. We've already had a few requests from people to be scanned, so that's going to be good. Now, don't forget as well that Tony's book, Tony from These Changing Times, his book is available for download for free on the front of our website under recent articles, which is called Blueprints of Cosmic Consciousness, Book 1 and Book 2. You can download that and read it, and I'm sure it'll be an interesting read. I'll have to get round to myself after I finish the Anglo Republic book, I think.
You're reading so many books. I don't know where you find the time to do anything else.
I'll tell you, I'm looking at videos during the week, and there's emails that come in from our listeners, which is great, and then we send out emails. And so don't forget to register as well, because we send out links to information that comes in, so be part of the registered list.
Just to mention, and this is nothing that we had planned to talk about, but all the information that comes in, and it has to be said, Alan has more time than I do to kind of do the research. And it was about 3 weeks ago, I think it was, he was actually suffering with his eyes here. He had big roaring red eyes, and they were kind of streaming as well. I thought he was crying. I thought he was happy to see me, and he was crying with the excitement. But no, it's from all the research that he's doing, and he's checking out all the videos, and he's not only does he kind of look at stuff, he kind of cross-references stuff as well. And I think that, I have to say fair play to you for doing what you do, because I know OYM, it's only on one night a week for 2 hours, but the amount of research that you actually do is phenomenal.
Well, checking up stuff. I mean, stuff comes in, and there was a 2-day period that my eyes were constantly bloodshot. I had to kind of take a walk away from the computer and stay away for a while because it was affecting me. But there you go. We soldier on. The guest next week now is going to be in the studio, as far as we know, and it's a chap called Deg Gerhardy. Now, Deg is a Reiki master. He's a light worker, and he's a Raelian member. Now, does anybody know what Aurelian is?
Is in Israelian?
No, Aurelian. Okay. There's a book out there. There's a chap in the 70s called Claude Royal, and he had a UFO experience. And basically they took him up in the UFO and he told them certain things. So he come down and he started the Aurelian movement. Now, he was a rally car driver before this. And so Claude Royal started the Aurelian movement, and Deg is I don't know whether he's a lapsed member of the Aurelian movement or he still is involved with the Aurelian movement, but he's a French guy. Yeah, he was a French guy, that's right. Yeah, weird clothes, yeah, he had I think he was on the late there, Lord Vapor, yeah. So we're going to get Deg on to talk about the Aurelian movement, and maybe a bit being a light worker, being a Reiki master, and obviously Deg was the person who actually told us about Nibiru in the first place. I think, Steve, wasn't it?
That's what I was saying there to John earlier in the show. I mean, I hadn't heard this information before, and it was actually Deg who that evening when we were down in Deg's home, where he shared this information, and he didn't just kind of blurt it out. He done it beautifully. He kind of gave us a little bit of a background, brought us up to speed. So it was kind of like, it was basically like what do you call those things? Oh,
roller coaster.
Roller coaster, yeah. So we kind of, he didn't just kind of drop it all on us. He didn't just fire it, He kind of built us up gently, and it was great information. And yeah, he's a lovely man.
Yeah, somebody says on TNS, TRP, that the suicide cult in California? Was that the Aurelian cult that committed suicide? I don't think so. I don't know. Well, we'll find out next week. Tune in next week to find out whether it was the cult. TNS time shortly. And who's on with Vin tonight, Steve?
I've touched base with Vin. He doesn't have anyone lined up at the moment, so it's just going to be the man himself, the voice that is Vin. Vin the voice. But yeah, so it's going to be Vin just doing his thing. And I'm sure people will ring in or call in. But anyway, TNS anyway, 9 o'clock if you're still in the mood for a little bit more of the same, or maybe even the lighter. A lighter look at what's going on, maybe TNS 9 o'clock.
Lighter side to life. Firebrand here says a lot of good-looking women join Royale, the radio movement. Yeah, I've heard the rumour that there's a lot of good-looking women in the radio movement.
Where do I sign up?
Don't know where the application form is, but I'm sure next week if you come on and speak to Deg, I'm sure he'll show you where to sign up. But he's going to be talking about that. So that's really it. So thanks for tuning in, everybody, and have a safe week. And take it easy. If there's any news, email us, let us know, and we'll try and get it out there. But until next week, you have myself, Alan James. Stay safe.
And that was beautifully put. Okay, I won't be as eloquent, so I'll just say, see you all again next week. Thanks for being part of OYM this evening. And hopefully we'll all be here next week. We can do it again. So from Stephen George, take care. Bye-bye.
Open your mind.